CALPADS Error Resolution CERT167. General Education Participation Percentage Range Code must be populated. So as always, we advise that the first step when troubleshooting any error in CALPADS is always to consult the CALPADS error list. And here you have the excerpt for this error description before you. You use the two columns on the left, the error number and the error name, to identify uh, the reference material to diagnose your error. And so we can see that we have a CERT167, and then we see the error name or the title of the error, General Education Participation Percentage Range Code must be populated. All right, so now let's get into the meat of the error list. The error description, the third column from the left, will help you identify your problem. It says, students with disabilities who are 5 years old and in kindergarten must have general education participation percentage range code populated. All right, so this tells us this field's not required for all students, but students who are 5 years old and in kindergarten must have it populated. Okay, so that's at least that's the nature in which this error is going to trigger on those specific students, these type of students. Okay, so then it tells us that it's a fatal error. We know that because we can't certify with it. And then there's fields validated. It's looking at your special education program. It's looking at the student information, and we need that because the student's birth date. And then it's looking at the grade level code in the student's enrollment. To give us further clarity on the nature of the error, there's understanding the error in the last column, the farthest on the right, the suggested resolution. If the student turned 5 on September 1st and the most recent special education record for the active special education student, the general education participation code range is null. That's why this error triggered. Suggested resolution: verify the education plan type code is correct. Verify the education participation percentage range is correct. If the student is age 5 as of census day, the education program setting in the general education participation range should be populated where the appropriate school age least restrictive environment. To resolve this error, submit an amendment on the most recent IEP meeting record that overlaps census day and amendment date or on prior to census day with fields updated for the appropriate school setting. So basically the suggested resolution says if then this error is triggering correctly, you need to amend your record or make changes to the record, right? And there's a nuance in how you do that if you're unfamiliar with special education reporting, which we will demonstrate. But let's look at some of the other documentation that helps us understand and diagnose this error. So there's the CALPADS file specifications. It defines every field. So when you're looking at field requirements, it's important to understand what's expected. This is the document you would go to. Again, this is another excerpt. So for this particular field, the general education participation percentage range code, it gives us a definition. A coded value representing the range of the percentage of time a student with disabilities participates in general education. Okay, so this is for students with disability, and it tells us a range of time that they're in general education with all other students. That's good to know. It refers us to the code set. Okay, so that's another document we should look at. And it has comments. It says for ages 6 to 22 only. That kind of conflicts with the error. However, the error is new. And so this most likely will be revised. And then it says if a student is age 6 through 23 inclusive and the special education program setting code is 400 or 500, then yes. So here we can see that the conditions of requirement are less than the CERT error. And because we are now wanting students that are age 5 and in kindergarten to have this field reported, we can see how some students were reported without a IVR or submission validation. So that's the reason for the CERT167 is to back up the requirements or to add additional requirements to this field being populated. And then we have the CALPADS code set, as we were referred to from the CFS. And this tells us the values that would be applicable in that field. And so you see the codes are 1, 2, and 3. And the description of what those codes represent is in the name, equal to or greater than 80%, between 40% and 79%, less than 40%. And then the definition, a student with disabilities participates in general education at least 80% of the school day. And you can see how that's going. So those are the official CalPADS documents that help us. And they give us an understanding of what's expected in those fields. Sometimes you may have to do additional research. Um, you can search the CDE web portal for information. You could look up what least restrictive environment means. You could look up general education participation, but you get a greater understanding of what's required. There's several modules that help describe IEP requirements. There are videos, and then there's the associated transcript. So here's a transcript for the IEP module 2, and it says, what it's describing are the responsibilities of the LEAs under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And so there's several different bullets, but the central focus point is the second bullet. We've highlighted here the concept of least restrictive environment, which guides the IEP team in making decisions about the most appropriate place to ensure students access to general curriculum as much as possible with non-disabled peers. So that's why it's important and why we've had to add the validation for the 167, because you have a school-age child in kindergarten. Although kindergarten is not compulsory, it's a school-age child, and they need to be afforded the same opportunity if they're in the classroom to access general education. And so when the validations for the field first came in, they were aligned with the federal laws. And as you know, kindergarten education is not required. And so it was 6 to 23, right? Basically, it was going to be your first graders until the students age out. But in California, we do have kindergarten. And because it's a classroom environment and the students still should have access to general curriculum, we've added a validation. And so you may have not been in the practice of populating that for your students that are 5-year-olds and kindergarten, but now it's required moving forward. So we'll demonstrate how to identify and then tell you what you need to do to correct this error. And we'll do that in an online demonstration, your favorite part, right? So we know you love CalPADS, and it just keeps on coming. Okay, so today we're going to demonstrate how to identify and resolve CERT167. General education participation percentage range code must be populated. We're on the CERT error screen for fall 1. You can see that we have 3 students that have triggered this error, and we just click show to reveal the records. Here we have them down below. We'll click the SSID. I like to right click and open a new tab. I've already done that. And so we have the student's record here, okay? And first we have to understand the error. So when troubleshooting, we want to have access to the error list, right? Because it gives us the guidance that we need. And here is the CERT167. I've already filtered for it. Several error videos. There's navigating the error list. It shows you how to use this error list. So I'm not going to go into great detail how I was able to have this ready so fast, right? But we do want to look and identify the problem. And so to do that, we're going to look at the error description. Students with disabilities who are 5 years old and in kindergarten must have a general education participation range. And to verify that this student should be triggering the error, we have to look to see if the general education participation range code was populated in our SPED record, as well as the student is 5 years old and in kindergarten. So that requires us to look at the student information and the student enrollment. The fields validated are telling us where to look for a discrepancy, where in our data, where to look for the violation. of the rules so that we can see what's triggering this particular error, okay? And then suggested resolution is going to tell us a little bit more about the conditions that trigger the error or what CALPADS expects, so we have understanding the error. If the student turned 5 on September 1st and the most recent, okay, so that's greater detail because it's telling us the most recent special education record for the active SPED student in the general education participation percentage range code is null. That's why the error triggers, okay? Then at the bottom, it tells us what we can do to resolve this. If the student is 5, as of census day, the education program setting GE participation range should be populated with an appropriate school age, least restrictive environment. To resolve this error, submit an amendment on the most recent IEP record that overlaps census day with the amendment date on or prior to census day with the fields updated. So what's important is it's telling us that we can correct this field through an amendment as long as that amendment is on or before census day, right? That's good to know. Very good to know. So let's drag this out of here and think about it, right? When you're on the certification screen, you have your students' information. Now we have to blur out these SSIDs so you can't see it, but the identifiers tell you which record you're looking at. Your student may have multiple records. You can always copy this identifier. Then when you're on the student's record, we can go down to special education. You see there's 3 records, right? Can do a find and then a paste, a Ctrl-F, and then a Ctrl-F to open the find, then you paste it in with the Ctrl-V. It's highlighting the record that's causing the problem. Okay, so it's telling me that this record doesn't have the GE participation range code populated. So I'll open it up, scroll down, and look for okay, here. General education participation percentage range is in fact blank. So this is triggering the error. Now, what are the other conditions, right? Let's go back up to the student's enrollment. The student is in kindergarten, okay? And then the student must be 5 years old. I could look at the student's birth date. It was 1/15/2015. So this student is nearly 6 years old, being that the current year is 2020. The student was 5 when they entered kindergarten, and they will be 5 on census day. So that field is required to be populated. Now, how do I go about amending this record, right? Certainly, I can go in to my special education system, update the student's record, populate the general education participation range code, just resubmit that, right? Well, I can as an amendment. And so then I would have this record, and then my most recent record is that amendment, provided that amendment is dated before this date, right? So it will take an amendment to this record as long as. Now, what were the conditions that were described in the error list? The amendment has to be on or before census day because all of this data, all the CERT errors are triggering as of census day. Another alternative is if you're just going to update this record, you would have to open the record, delete it from CALPADS, then resubmit it from your special education system to replace it. So either you're going to submit an amendment to this record with the subsequent date from the meeting date, but before census day, or you're going to replace this record by deleting it from CALPADS manually online and then submitting the record. But that's how you resolve the CERT167. So hopefully that was informative. Hopefully it helps you in your troubleshooting process. If you need further information or if you have a specific scenario, please contact the CALPADS Service Desk. We are ready and willing to help.